This is the Palin Update on Mama Grizzly Radio. I'm Kevin Scholla.
They talk about tradition. They live out traditional Judeo-Christian ethics that our nation is founded upon. And I think that not only is refreshing, but it's inspiring and empowering for the rest of America.
They're happy in Louisiana over the candidacy of Zach Dasher, the conservative, who happens to be the nephew of Duck Commander Phil Robertson, is running for Congress. He's backed by Governor Palin, and he's here today to talk about his campaign. Governor Palin backs Tom Emmer in Minnesota. A brand new Commonwealth Common Sense with Susan Stimson is coming up from Virginia. And just ahead, our latest edition of Steel Resolve with Sarah Steelman in Missouri. First, it's time to meet Zach Dasher. This young family man, businessman, and church leader is the nephew of Phil Robertson, and he's running for Congress in Louisiana's 5th. Right now, we welcome Zach Dasher to the Palin Update on Mama Grizzly Radio. How are you, sir?
Good. How about yourself?
Doing well. Thanks so much for being here. We appreciate it. And you're making a big run for Congress, and your campaign has the backing of Governor Sarah Palin. What's that like for you?
Oh, that was big news. You know, I remember when I was watching her at the Republican National Convention, I was standing on the edge of my couch, hooping and hollering. So to get an endorsement from somebody like that is just amazing. So it fired me up, man.
I like the way you put that. Isn't that unbelievable? You know, she really did bring that energy. It was like you were watching a football game or watching, you know, one of your favorite all-time shows, the finale. When she came out there, it really captured the imagination of so many, a lot of people who were really never involved in politics before.
Yeah, I think she just spoke the language of the American people. You know, she said the things that we were hoping somebody would finally say. So, you know, it was a breath of fresh air, to say the least.
Now, she has been endorsing candidates over the last few years, and, you know, Jim DeMint has said she is the most important endorsement out there. Ted Cruz, another one who gives that same assessment of Governor Palin. So it really is a big deal to have her in your corner. But for you, it wasn't just looking at the issues. I mean, obviously, she agrees with you on so much. I mean, you're pro-life, you're a Second Amendment guy, and you want to fight for smaller government. But she actually got a chance to hear you speak, and when she heard you speak, she thought that you'd be a guy that maybe should be in a leadership position. Can you tell us a little bit about this? This was at the, Republican Leadership Conference?
Yes, I was down in New Orleans, and I had the opportunity to speak. And so when I walked on stage, she actually introduced me, and then I introduced Phil. And after I spoke, you know, I just gave a talk about natural rights, that, you know, our rights don't come from elite politicians in Washington, D.C., but rather they come from God Almighty. And after I gave that message to the audience, I walked off stage, and she was standing there, and it was just one of those surreal moments, you know, when you see someone that you admire so much standing behind you, and she just whispered in my ear, she said, "Zach, you have to run for office." So, you know, here we are 6 months later, and we're finishing out a congressional race.
Now, folks, you just heard Zach say Phil. He's referring to Phil Robertson. Yes, that Phil Robertson, the Duck Commander himself from Duck Dynasty fame. You have a very close relationship with him. Zach, it's your uncle.
Absolutely, he is my uncle and my PR director for the campaign. He's doing all my press because he's so good with the press.
Well, you know what? I agree with that he is, but I know what you mean. The mainstream media, or lamestream media, as Governor Palin would put it, another guy who makes them pull their hair out, which is funny because certainly Phil's got plenty of hair to go around on that chin of his. But you see these things. Isn't that amazing, though, what happened to your uncle? I mean, this is a guy who merely just stated what he believes and who merely stated traditional Christian values, and here he got just ripped to shreds, and people just piled on. And I think, you know, that's another situation where Governor Palin, you know, backs the Duck Dynasty crowd so much, and I think that that's part of it because, you know, she's certainly used to that unfair treatment, and your Uncle Phil got a lot of that.
Well, I'll tell you what, I think Governor Palin, I think I'm correct when I say she was the first, maybe the second, I think she was the first person to actually come out in support of Phil, which takes a lot of courage. You know, that was before, you know, the backlash happened against the mainstream media, but she was one of the first people to come out and support the family. And so, you know, we obviously really appreciate her. But, you know, this whole thing has been interesting to watch because what it shows is it shows the intolerance of the so-called tolerance movement. You know, we're told to tolerate everybody, but except for the Christian worldview. And then if you espouse the Christian worldview, of course, then you're not tolerated at all. So it just seems a little bit hypocritical. But Phil's doing fine. He's going to speak the truth and stand on what he believes, and I'm glad that he's doing what he's doing.
Yeah, you hit it on the head. Tolerance unless we disagree with you, right?
Absolutely.
Now, Governor Palin really wrote a nice endorsement about your candidacy, and she has just been a whiz with social media as far as Facebook and Twitter is concerned. And a couple of weeks ago when she backed your run here, really wrote a nice write-up about you. And we mentioned a little bit earlier about that you are pro-life, that you are a Second Amendment supporter. You're also a small businessman. Can you talk to us about that, exactly what type of business and why that would help you if you are indeed elected?
I've worked in the private sector of the economy. I've been in the healthcare industry for the last 13 or 14 years, and then I've ran some small businesses on the side as well. And I can tell you firsthand that the economy is not in good shape. We brag about the unemployment rate falling, but what we don't tell you is that it's falling because people aren't looking for jobs anymore. We actually have the lowest labor participation rate in my lifetime. I'm 36 years old, and there's fewer people working in the United States of America today than at any point in my life. And that's a problem. It's one of the reasons why I jumped in this race. We need to start promoting job-creating policies, not job-killing policies, but that's not what's happening out of D.C. Instead, we have this central takeover of our economy. It's destroying it. So I just want to see the power put back in the hands of the people.
You and your wife, Jill, have 4 children. How much do they play a part in this? I mean, this is their future on the line. My 2 kids as well. I mean, we're looking at a situation where they're already in debt so much over their heads. So having a guy like you in Washington could maybe put a little pushback to all of this that we're getting from big government.
Absolutely, and my family plays a huge part in it. My wife's extremely supportive, and my 4 kids as well, and each and every one of them. Even my 3-year-old son is a free market economist. He loves the free market. We're teaching him young here, but we believe this that our rights do not come from elite politicians in Washington, that they come from the Almighty God. And one of the reasons why I'm running is to restore that fundamental truth that undergirds this great nation. If we don't do something quick, we're going to find ourselves in a big mess here. We have an $18 trillion debt. We've got $144 trillion worth of unfunded liabilities. This cannot go on. We need systemic changes, and not just for my kids' future, but for our future too. I believe the threat is imminent. I don't think we're looking at 50 years down the road. I think the economic threat is imminent, and we need to stand up now for our rights that undergird our freedoms that lead to the prosperous nation that we've all enjoyed.
You're pro-life, Sarah Palin, a real pro-life warrior and champion of the cause. Why is it? I mean, you talk about these gifts that we're given from God, these rights that come to us from God, not from government. What is it about the pro-life movement that moves you so much, and what do we need to do to make sure we don't let people get desensitized to really what's going on in this country when it comes to protecting life?
I think the key is to not buy the lie of the media. They're going to attempt to marginalize folks like us at every turn. What we have to remember is this, that in 1901, the Supreme Court ruled that the Constitution should be read in the spirit of the Declaration of Independence. Now, what is that spirit? Well, Thomas Jefferson, when he made the argument for why we should be free from the tyranny of England, said we hold these truths to be self-evident. They're obvious. That all men are created equal, that they're endowed by the Creator. So the rights come from God. What are they? Life, number one. The first thing on the bucket list is life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. So look, life undergirds this whole thing. If we aren't free to live, then what are we free to do? And so I think that we should fight at every cost to protect human life. And I think that folks like Sarah Palin and myself and those who surround me are doing just that.
Yeah, you got it. Without life, these other issues are just inconsequential.
Yeah, I mean, it all starts there.
Now, the Second Amendment has really been under fire. I mean, the last few years, we've seen an administration that has exploited tragedy, that has exploited children to try to push their far-left gun-grabbing agenda. We've also seen every city that tries to put these strict restrictions on our rights as Americans to bear arms, it results in more crime. It results in more shootings. What will you do if elected as far as our Second Amendment is concerned?
Well, the Second Amendment is the one right that ensures all of the rest. You take away a person's right to defend themselves, and guess what? Then you can do whatever you want to them. So I'll fight to obviously uphold our Constitution, which would include our Second Amendment. I'm a believer in the right to bear arms, and I think it's important to recognize that the Second Amendment is not just the right to bear arms so that we can go duck hunting or deer hunting or shoot skeet. This is a right to defend yourselves, and not just against criminals, but against a tyrannical government as well. So, this was embedded in our Constitution for a reason. And if I'm elected to Congress, I'm going to fight to make sure that the people can defend themselves against an oppressive government. I think that's what the whole point of the Second Amendment was. So, let's not sugarcoat it or water it down.
Yeah, I think that whole thought of tyranny, to people in our generation, really seemed as almost fiction or something in the past to people. But we have certainly gotten a wake-up call these last few years when we see a federal government that just ignores the Constitution, usurps any chance they need to with executive order and things of that nature. So you really start to see, what the real meaning of the Second Amendment is. Unfortunately, though, some of these politicians we heard, in New York with Cuomo and others, they think it's about hunting. Like you just said, completely have it wrong.
Yeah, this has been a problem between our fight for the last 30 years or since I've been watching, and it's that we allow our opponents to set the premise of the debate. And I think that's why we lose a lot of these debates, because we allow them to set the premise, and the premise is usually what the government, who can take better care of you. Of course, we would argue on the fundamental role of government, but you're right, man. Ronald Reagan said that tyranny, we were only one generation away from we were always one generation away from tyranny. And I think it's something that if we don't fight for our rights, and it's a continual fight to stay free, then this will happen. You will end up eventually being taken over by a tyrant. So we must fight for these things. We got to stand up. We got to get involved. It's one of the reasons why I'm running. Get involved, ordinary citizens off the sideline, and stand up for your God-given freedoms.